First of all, I must say that when I read the piece by His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, I felt very, very proud. I felt so very proud, partly because I contrasted his stance on what Donald Trump had done with the stance of the just ended regime of His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. I recall seeing the Ghanaian president sitting in front of Anthony Blinken and reporting on another head of state, indeed in this case the head of state of Burkina Faso, and asking for US assistance in order to subvert the interest of another African country. The contrast is so huge, so very huge. And when I read President John Dramani Mahama's article, I said, perhaps we are redeeming ourselves. We are beginning to show to the world that we will stand up for what we believe in and that we would not be kicked around anymore. Now, having said that, I think I must agree with Solomon Owusu, the other panelist, for his remarks about Cyril Ramaphosa. I was deeply embarrassed by Cyril Ramaphosa. And I was more worried when I heard some African commentators saying that, oh, he comported himself well, that in the face of the insults and the attack, he remained cool and so on. And I was wondering, and when we're being humiliated, when we're being pummeled, when we're being attacked, if you remain cool and composed, is that a credit? Is that really a credit? You know, one of the questions that I've asked is that what was Cyril Ramaphosa doing in the Oval Office? Who sent him there? Who asked him to go there? What was his problem? You see, again, I have to agree with Solomon that he knew that he was going to be humiliated. He knew that the stage had been set to embarrass Africa, to embarrass South Africa. And you can tell that from the composition of his delegation. He actually took time to select white golfers to be part of his delegation. And his administration explained that Donald Trump is in love with golf and that the selection of white golfers was to serve as an appeasement to Donald Trump. Cyril Ramaphosa, why this behavior? Why this embarrassment? I mean, unbelievable. He knew it was going to happen. It had happened to many others before him, you understand? And yet, he deliberately walked into a trap to be humiliated. I find nothing graceful about how Cyril Ramaphosa behaved in South Africa. Cyril Ramaphosa was an embarrassment to the African people, and he must be told in the face. African leaders have a duty to solidarize with themselves and with their people in their struggles against decadence, in their struggle against poverty, in their struggles against underdevelopment, and so on. The leaders of Africa must understand that it is not their duty to appease those who lead the countries which have led us to our current state of underdevelopment and poverty. Cyril Ramaphosa is one of those leaders who has not been able to find his bearing. Now, I was struck by the fact that the leader of the country, which most supported apartheid in South Africa, is the one who has the effrontery today to look South Africa in the face and accuse South Africa of racism. You see, sometimes we forget. Nelson Mandela, after 27 years in prison, when he was released, when he contested elections and won, and became president of South Africa, he was still on the terrorist list of the United States of America. Now, it is the United States of America, its president, which is turning around to accuse South Africa of racism. Unbelievable. I was looking for some description. I'm still struggling to find some description. And I know that the description I have now, which I'm going to use, may be inappropriate. But it still tells the story. And it is this case of the pot calling the kettle black. I mean, the racism in this segment itself is huge. Pot and kettle, the symbolism is huge. But let me use it for now. You understand? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. That president of the United States of America is talking about racist attacks. And in some of his speeches, he actually refers to what is happening in South Africa as genocide against whites.
White genocide.
Now, this is the country which is supplying the bombs which are being dropped on Gaza. 70,000 people have been killed in Gaza. 2/3 of them are women and children. This is the country which is providing intelligence to the Israeli army to bomb Gaza. They are showing the Israelis where to bomb. This is that country, Donald Trump. In the last 11 weeks, Israel has blocked food, water, medical supplies to Gaza with the approval of Donald Trump. And Donald Trump has the effrontery to accuse South Africa of racism. Unbelievable. But that is what has happened. It has happened because some of our African leaders really qualify to be described as house niggers. And they truly are house niggers. You see, the African story has not been told. The true African story has not been told yet.
By ourselves.
Yes. And indeed, Sana, please allow me to say this. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been pondering. And as a result, I decided to write a book, which is finished now.
Oh,
you know.
Wait. You wrote a book in the week.
No. the wallow is there. So at any time, when you pause it, it's there.
So I've actually written a book on reparation. Its history, the politics, the struggles, and the law. I mean, international law. I submitted it to the publishers last week. And hopefully it should come out immediately. And I do this because it is important to tell that African story. You understand? Because if you don't tell that African story, if you don't know that history, we would always be bullied. Look, we suffered centuries of slavery. The transatlantic slave trade. What was it about? Our forebears, the strongest, because the slavers were not interested in weak people, they needed strong people. So the strongest of our population were captured and sent out to work for the United States of America, some of these Western countries and so on, without pay for hundreds of years. And so, they captured our best architects, our best medicine men or doctors, our engineers and so on, were captured. 12.6 million Africans were removed from here and sent abroad to serve as beasts of burden. The African underdevelopment is partly accounted for by this. You understand? Now, only recently, when COVID-19 broke out, it was during that period that I learned that the art of vaccination came from West Africa. The art of vaccination is African. It came from West Africa. Today, we are looking for AstraZeneca vaccines and so on. We started it. It was stolen from us. You understand? So the harm that the transatlantic slave trade did to us is huge. But you see, we even have to go back to the origin. And if you go back to the origin, it's even more shocking. What Western religion has done to us, Western religion, the Catholic Church, what it did to us is huge. Look, it was in 1452, that the Pope signed the papal bull, authorizing King Alfonso of Portugal to go and civilize the rest of the world. And by civilization meant converting the world to Christianity. And in the papal bull, please, if you have Google it, it's there. The Pope said that those who refuse to be converted to Christianity should be killed. The Pope. That those who refuse to convert to Christianity should be killed. Their wives should be seized from them, and so on. This is 1452. It is the papal bull who described African lands as vacant, lands without owners, and so on, and created the conditions for what became classical colonialism. And under classical colonialism, we had no rights as African people at all. No rights. You see, first of all, we couldn't choose our leaders. In the Gold Coast, at some point, district chief executives were appointed by the Queen of England. We are not talking about the president. District chief executives were appointed by the Queen of England. The head of state, who was the governor who sacked the Christiansborg Castle, was a representative of the Queen of England. We had no rights at all. When I was growing up, and I'm still alive, I'm sitting here, so you can imagine what my grandfather saw. When I was growing up, you go to school, your science teacher is white. Your science teacher is white. In some schools, the headmasters were white. You go to church, the priest is white. You go to hospital, the doctor is white. So everybody who mattered in a society was white. I mean, invariably, inferiority complex begins to creep in as a result of the setting. In Accra, the Rich Hospital, which is today the Greater Accra Regional Hospital, was a whites-only hospital. Black people who were there were sweepers, were servants. It was a whites-only hospital. What has today become the Accra Club was a whites-only club. You understand? This is what we have been through. Now, if you go to the United States of America, the situation is even worse. When these white vagabonds, in fact, ex-prisoners, buccaneers, and crooks, and so on, were sent to the United States of America, what did they do? They killed the Chicanos. They killed the Red Indians in order to possess their lands, to take their lands from them. They killed them. They massacred them. In fact, the United States of America today is built on the blood of Indians and the brawn power of blacks. That is why today in the United States of America, and the United States of America up to today has not overcome this racism and so on. So the Chicanos, the Latinos, the African Americans, and so on, are still subjected to extreme racism. Extreme racism. So if you live in a country like that, if you're president of a country like that, and you can turn around and call South Africa a racist society, something must be wrong. Something is not adding up.
Reverse racism.
You understand? I mean, in 1976, I visited the United States. You know, I toured about 8 of the states in the United States. And to my shock and horror, I was taken to a place called Mikusuki in the south. near Miami and so on. And I was told I was being taken to an Indian reservation. I didn't know what it meant until I got there. It's a zoo for human beings. Indians are kept there in their so-called natural habitats. And before you say, and it's happening up to today, you pay gate fee to go and see Indians in their so-called natural habitat. This is the country which is talking about human rights. This is the country which is preaching to us. In any case, look, after apartheid, and I visit South Africa quite a lot, you understand, the blacks are still completely dispossessed of their lands. And Dr. Admako Kisi spoke earlier and described the scene. I mean, you go to Joburg. Where are the blacks in Joburg? Apart from a few like Cyril Ramaphosa who have escaped the poverty net and are hobnobbing with the whites and so on, the blacks are still living in the apartheid era. Master, they live in shacks. I know what a shack is. Homes built of curtains or at best discarded corrugated iron sheets. And they burn all the time. And they are harassed by the police all the time. You move from South Africa, from Joburg, and you drive 2 hours to Bella Bella and see the tracts of land owned by white people. Indeed, until recently, any black you found in Bella Bella is a driver, a domestic servant, or farm laborer. And Donald Trump doesn't see this. He doesn't know about this. And he's talking about this war song, Kill the Boers. That's not a song which was composed today. Indeed, it was a war song of resistance. It was a war song of resistance, which Malema continues to sing. You understand? It's a symbol of the resistance of black people to years of torture, to years of dehumanizing existence, and so on. And then he raises this issue, and so Ramaphosa's answer is that, oh, Malema belongs to a small party. He's not mainstream. Is that the answer? Cyril Ramaphosa, is that all you could say? And then he says that in South Africa there are laws which allows everybody to express himself. That's Cyril Ramaphosa's answer to Donald Trump. Incredible, unbelievable. I cannot believe it. But you see, with leaders like Cyril Ramaphosa, how are we ever going to make progress on this continent? Today, it is hard to find an Nkrumah in the leadership of Africa. Today, it's extremely difficult to find a Modibo Keita or a Sekuturi or an America Cabral and so on. They are all looking like Cyril Ramaphosa. And that is why I'm so very happy that His Excellency President John Dramani Mahama said something which is edifying, said something which clearly shows that among this rabble of neo-colonial leaders and so on, it is still possible to find 1 or 2, maybe 3 or 4, who will stand up to defend the dignity of the African people, and who would insist that African people should solidarize with themselves in the face of this aggression. And Master, a lot of people don't understand why the West is supporting the Zionists in Israel against Palestine. They don't understand. I mean, only yesterday I was talking to some friends and I said, what is happening in the world? So, you mean the Western countries can't see what is happening in Gaza and so on? I said, look, they cannot condemn what is happening in Gaza because a condemnation of what is happening in Gaza will be a condemnation of themselves. This is how capitalism was built. Capitalism was built on slave labor, the accumulation which led to capitalism. is built on slave labor. You understand? And we have been so brainwashed that now we actually act against ourselves. And one of the most popular Christian songs is Amazing Grace. Those of you who go to church. When they start singing it in church, they sing it with passion. Amazing Grace. And so,
How sweet.
do you know the history of that song? That song was written by an accomplice in slave raiding. Slave trader wrote Amazing Grace. So you black man, when you go to church and you are singing Amazing Grace with passion, you are a fool.
Oh.
No, it is true.
Oh.
Master, what is wrong with what I just said?
Out of ignorance.
But if you are ignorant, what are you?
So they are pleading. So we're pleading.
So they sing Amazing Grace with passion. A song written by a slave trader. Understand? But we have been so brainwashed. And look,
even the Achimota issue. That's why I was not happy. We used to have our hair. Our hair is literally nappy, and for that matter, nappy hair was rather an issue for whites. And should somebody go to Achimota with hair that is nappy, who are we to be? That was our natural, type of hair.
you see, of course, everybody knows that I still hold President Mills in high esteem. I think he was a decent man. He was an honest man. He loved his country and so on. But there are some aspects of President Mills's life, which tells me that he himself had become a victim of the colonial narrative. When he decided that libation pouring should be ended, because he was a Christian, I was wondering, how can such a fine man, a man dedicated to his country, a man who in his heart of hearts felt that he stood for African liberation and so on, come up with such an edict?
He wasn't a traditionalist.
It was because he, like many others, have been brainwashed, completely brainwashed. Look, it was Bishop Accusation of Kumasi, Catholic bishop, and I want to salute Bishop Accusation wherever he is, who came up and said, look, there's no difference between libation pouring and the Holy Sacrament. Catholic bishop, he said it, not me. I'm sure you've all heard it, that there's no substantial difference between libation pouring and the Holy Sacrament. Look, it was only recently that Africans, Ghanaians, could go to church in African robes. It was considered hidden. It is only recently that when the priests wear their cassock and so on, sometimes you see stripes of kente and so on in it. It was not allowed. African drums were banned from the churches. African drums. And compare African drums to European drums and see which produces the best rhythm and so on. But ours was banned. Ours was banned so that we become dependent even on the West for our music, for our culture and so on. The time has come to change this. The time has come to build that new Africa, whose people are proud of who they are. You see, we live in the tropics. We live in the tropics. And the tropical condition, in fact, demands that we eat some foods. Those who live in the temperate region, because of their geography, their weather and so on, have to eat some things which makes them warm. Okay? And so on. But we have been so brainwashed that today we are even refusing to eat tropical food and are eating food from the temperate zone. It is not even good for our health. Look, up to today, our legal profession believes that you need to wear a black suit
Yeah.
Put a bib around your neck.
That's a British legal system.
Wear a gown. And on top of that, wear a wig in order to look decent. Unbelievable. And we uphold that as some tradition. Imagine the kind of heat that we went through yesterday. And imagine judges going to work in that apparel. And if, God forbid, your air conditioning fails,
This has been failing most of the time.
by the time you get to the court building, I don't want to smell your armpits. I mean, they subject themselves to this indignity.
So you recommend that they change their outfit, like the speaker has?
It is changing in some countries.
So maybe
I understand that in Burkina Faso, it is changing, and so on. For their own comfort, don't change because of me or what I say. For your own comfort, do you feel comfortable in that in that clownish outfit? Do you feel comfortable in that clownish outfit?